Anzellans are one of my favorite recent additions to the Star Wars franchise, and seeing a few of them in The Mandalorian and Grogu going around in their silly little starship made me wonder what other ships could be useful to someone their size. Let's take a look at 5 of the best. I'm Joey from Radio Free Coruscant, and these are the best ships for Anzellans in Star Wars. H2 Executive Shuttle. The first ship I would like to suggest is the Slain and Corpil H2 Executive Shuttle. For a human-sized being, this ship was essentially a private jet. Just a tiny shuttle to carry you and a few of your friends for a day trip or business meeting. But for an Anzellan, this vessel has a lot more potential. Most Anzellans appear to be around 9 inches tall, 1/8 the height of a human. The Anzellan starship seen in The Mandalorian and Grogu looked to me to be around 3 meters long, or 24 meters if it were scaled up to human size, making it the Anzellan equivalent of something like the U-Wing or Lambda-class shuttle. Therefore, if a group of Anzellans got their hands on an H2 executive shuttle, it would essentially be their equivalent of a consular-class cruiser at 116 1/8 scale Anzellan meters. This would make it substantially larger than Earth's largest passenger planes, making it a great mass transit shuttle or passenger liner for an Anzellan travel agency. The H2 measured 14.6 meters long by about 15.6 meters wide and 4 tall. It had a top speed of 875 kilometers per hour and likely a Class 1 or 2 hyperdrive. It required only 1 pilot and could carry 5 passengers, at least when operated by humans. An Anzellan H2 would probably need a couple extra crew, and would be able to carry however many passengers the ship's owners decide to install seats for. Naturally, all of the ships on this list would require substantial modifications for use by Anzellans. The stats for each will be given in their original stock form, since the number of Anzellan crew and passengers would be completely arbitrary. I doubt that all of these ships could carry only 8 times as many Anzellans as humans, or require 8 times as many crew. It would depend entirely on the ship's function and internal layout, the modifications made to it by the Anzellans in question, and more. Anyway, the H2's price is unknown, but for its size and simplicity, I would guess it to be around 25,000 credits. Iota-class Shuttle. Next up is the Sinar Fleet Systems Cygnus Spaceworks Iota-class TS-485 Light Shuttle. You would be forgiven for thinking this ship is an Anzellan version of the Lambda-class shuttle already, but that is not so. At Anzellan scale, the Iota would actually be more like a Gozanti cruiser at about 67 meters long. Though its hull is proportionally much wider than that of the Gozanti, so it would almost be like 2 Gozantis welded together side by side. It is impossible to overstate how useful that would be, as long-time viewers will know that the Gozanti is the best ship in the galaxy. Of course, its upsides don't transfer to the Iota just because that ship is the Anzellan proportional equivalent to it, but it would still be useful to them. We don't get a look inside the ship in its only couple of appearances to date, but its tiny size means it would essentially just be a hollow shell with some seats inside, like the similarly sized shuttlecraft in Star Trek. That would make it extraordinarily easy for a crew of Anzellans to strip it out and fill it with equipment better suited to their size. Its enormous windows would provide an unparalleled view, which the Anzellans and their keen vision are sure to appreciate. This would make it great as a pleasure yacht, but if Anzellan culture is not inclined to leisure, it would still be useful as a freighter or generic transport as well. I would think the microscopic vision that allows Anzellans to be such effective mechanics would give them the ability to create very interesting art as well, with tons of incredibly fine detail, and a classy and elegant ship like this would be perfect for a family of Anzellan artists. Normally, when I talk about the Iota, I bring up that we don't know if it was available for sale to the general public, but I'm not sure it would matter in this case. One of the unused plot lines for The Rise of Skywalker, where the Anzellan species was introduced, involved them having been enslaved by the Empire and kept captive aboard Star Destroyers to do maintenance in hard-to-reach areas. This was going to culminate in Babu Frick giving the Resistance a device that could disable most First Order technology, created using his knowledge of Imperial programming. This storyline did not make it into the film, but in a hypothetical timeline where at least the part about Anzellans being kept on Star Destroyers and ground facilities is true, a crew of Anzellans could probably steal an Iota-class shuttle to escape due to its tiny size. Star Destroyers were not known to carry Iotas, but their exact embarked craft loadout doesn't appear to be consistent, and is likely up to individual captains. Some of them almost certainly had one or two aboard for various purposes. Either way, whether stolen or purchased, an Iota-class shuttle would be a great fit for a crew of Anzellans. The Iota-class measured just 8.4 meters long by 9.5 meters wide and 4.5 meters tall. It probably had a top speed of at least 900 kilometers per hour and a Class 1 or 2 hyperdrive. It required one pilot and could carry at least 1 to 5 passengers, probably more like 25 to 50 if they were Anzellans, likely 1 ton of cargo, and 1 week of consumables. Like the H2, it probably cost around 25,000 credits. Barloz-class. For something much larger, an Anzellan crew could look to the Corellian Engineering Corporation Barloz-class medium freighter. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say an Anzellan community. The Barloz would be the Anzellan equivalent to something like the Arquitans or Carrack-class cruisers at over 350 Anzellan meters long, though obviously much less well-armed than its human equivalents. There isn't really anything in particular about the Barloz that makes it seem like a good ship for the Anzellans to me, but its shape and the position of its cockpit remind me of the tiny Anzellan ship in The Mandalorian and Grogu, so I went with it anyway. The ship would have plenty of space for hundreds of Anzellans to live in it, storage for all the tools and parts they would ever need, and probably even a sizable workshop. By Anzellan standards, anyway. The ship's escape pods could probably be omitted and their docking bays replaced with small hangars for ships like the one used by the Anzellans on Navarro, or other similar Anzellan-scale craft. It could probably also host several of the Anzellan speeder bikes with no problem. In general, the Barloz was just a good, durable, highly modifiable ship that a tiny, mechanically inclined species like the Anzellans would make good use of. The Barloz-class measured 41 meters long by about 25 meters wide and 10 meters tall. It had a top speed of 850 kilometers per hour and a Class 2 hyperdrive. It was armed with just one fixed laser cannon, but as a CEC product, it would be very easy to upgrade. It required one pilot and one optional gunner, and could carry 4 passengers, 85 to 120 tons of cargo, and 2 months of consumables. The Barloz-class cost 120,000 credits new in Legends, or just 70,000 in canon, perhaps reflecting a price decrease after the release of the YT series that replaced it. The ship could also be purchased for just 17,500 used. YT-700. Another great freighter for a species like the Anzellans is the Corellian Engineering Corporation YT-700 Transport. This was an early entry in the legendary YT series product line, and while I would not recommend it to most pilots due to its small size, it would be perfect for a troop of Anzellans. In fact, I'm not wholly convinced that a human would be able to fit in more than its cockpit and a tiny area in the center of its hull, but Anzellans could make use of the space much more effectively. They could access the narrower outer edges of the hull and have access to much more of its floor space. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the ship was designed for smaller species in the first place. Not necessarily as small as Anzellans, but there are plenty of beings in between the sizes of Anzellans and humans. I wasn't able to come up with an exact size comparison for the YT-700, but it would scale to about 170 Anzellan meters, so it would basically be like several CR-90 Corvettes or similar lined up next to each other. In normal meters, the YT-700 measured 21.7 meters long by about 17.7 wide and 5 tall. It had a top speed of just 600 kilometers per hour and a Class 2 hyperdrive. The ship was armed with one dual laser cannon turret. It required one pilot and one gunner, and could carry 4 passengers, 50 tons of cargo, and 6 months of consumables. The YT-700 cost 18,000 credits used, though oddly we don't know what its price was new. I would estimate it to be around 75,000 credits. Celestan cargo freighter. And finally, one of the best ships for Anzellans in Star Wars is the as-yet unnamed Celestan cargo freighter, also known as the Celestan cargo barge. This was a relatively obscure Corvette-scale freighter with the ability to carry a number of external cargo containers. Specifically, it could carry 12 9x5x5 meter containers and 22 14x7x7 meter containers. Obviously, the ship was fairly large to hold that many containers of those sizes, and would be colossal by the standards of a 9-inch tall Anzellan. In fact, it would basically be equivalent in size to a Star Destroyer for them, at 1400 Anzellan meters. And while I doubt the Anzellans would need a ship that size for most applications, it would make for a great flying city. Each of the larger containers would be equivalent to a 34-story building, and the smaller ones would be 21 stories. That would make the Celestan barge's cargo load essentially a block of large Anzellan apartment buildings, and leave plenty of space within the hull for restaurants, stores, utilities, and everything else an Anzellan city would need. I don't really know why you would need to have an entire city be as mobile as a starship, but the SCF would be one of the best ways to do so. The collection of independent containers would mean you could use it to move buildings around between various ground cities if desired, for example, or swap out different buildings for different purposes. Perhaps instead of them all being apartments, the Anzellans live inside the ship, and the pods hold different factories or industrial equipment for different purposes, and the occupants of the ship travel around offering their mechanical services across the galaxy. When you're as small as an Anzellan, your options for ways to use a ship increase exponentially, especially ones with some kind of modular component like this. The Celestan cargo barge measured roughly 175 meters long by 48 meters wide and 23 meters tall, at least according to its concept art sketch. None of its other stats are known or can be conclusively determined, but it probably had a Class 3 hyperdrive and a top atmospheric speed of 750 km per hour. The ship probably required at least 10 to 20 crew, and could potentially carry a couple dozen passengers, or thousands if they were Anzellans. Its cargo capacity is probably at least 30,000 tons, assuming a storage capacity of around 1,000 tons per large container and 500 per small. This would also be just under double the capacity of the GR-75, which seems fair as the ship is also just under double the size of that one. And sticking to the GR-75 as a comparison, the SCF probably had a cost of around 300,000 credits new, or 100,000 used. And those are 5 of the best ships for Anzellans in Star Wars. Please let me know which of these you would choose if you were 9 inches tall, or what you would have selected instead. Also let me know if you would be interested in seeing a sequel to this video with some more suggestions sometime. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. RFC, out.